Crowhill here. Today we review a blonde ale and discuss De-extinction. Hey,
well,
good evening, Pigweed.
Good evening.
Hey.
How about some beer and conversation?
That's a great idea. What are we drinking?
This is a blonde ale.
All right, it looks like a blonde ale.
Yes.
Fantastic.
I'm going to talk about the difference between a blonde ale and a pale ale.
Okay, I love that style. Sounds good.
So what's on your mind?
Well, I'm not really a Game of Thrones guy. I read some of the Game of Thrones stuff and watched a little bit of it, but they totally misinterpreted what a dire wolf is. They had these things that are like horse size.
Oh.
And dire wolves really weren't like that. And it's good now that we finally have actual dire wolves.
Well, that's the thing.
Yeah.
We now have brought back.
We have actual dire wolves.
13,000 years ago.
So we can compare this to what...
yes, we can set the record straight for you Game of Thronians because we have a genuine, previously extinct,
yes,
now no longer extinct,
dire wolf. And we'll talk about that.
We'll talk about that.
But first,
this here, so interesting. They on the website, you go to the tap room, and it calls it a fruity pale ale. While the can itself says a blonde ale with orange.
So a blonde ale is not a pale ale.
Well, they basically are. So what I'm saying is, I want you to taste it. And what would you say? What would you think is the better category? A blonde ale with orange or a fruity pale ale? So I'm going to get in here myself.
Wow, lots of orange going on there. Yeah, that's a lot of fruit. That's the first thing you notice.
Oh,
here. That's
no joke. Sometimes you got to search around. You're like, is there fruit in here?
Right.
No, this
one's right there.
And it says what it was fermented on a bed of fermented on orange zest for a light citrus character.
Yeah.
And rich with wheat flavor in the finish. Silky mouth feel.
I'm not tasting enough malt backbone to call it a pale ale. So I'm kind of thinking blonde ale with orange is the better description.
Well, I think so too, because I would say that the difference between the blonde ale and the pale ale is going to have a little more prominent hops character, and this does not.
No.
It might be overwhelmed by the...
I'm not getting a lot of hops or malt, honestly.
So I'm saying, blonde ale with orange, what's on the can is probably
the better description. Yeah, but it's very good.
It's very good, but the orange is no joke. See, I'm going to have to find out how they did this, because I, each year, have brewed my Oriole IPA or my Steady Eddie, and the idea is I want it orange in color and with some orange flavors.
Okay.
And I've gotten some dried orange peel and thrown it in the boil, but it seems from this description here they've got orange zest in the fermenter.
Wow.
Maybe that's how you get all this orange flavor.
Maybe you put the orange zest in a bag and hang it in the fermenter or something like that.
Yes, because before I put it in the boil, and maybe that's...
And that just got rid of it, maybe in the boil. Yeah, well, this is very interesting.
And it's certainly orangey, and, it's Oriole.
But it's not orangey like an orange crush or, like something. It's not offensively orange. Sometimes some craft beer stuff, when they say we're going to make it taste like some other thing, they put so much in there, it's like punching you in the face. This is... obvious and it's there, but it's not obnoxiously there.
It's also I've had some fruity, some citrus flavors that just taste artificial, even though they don't mention artificial on the can. But to me, it tastes like you're drinking a beer while chewing gum.
Right.
That artificial fruity taste. You know what I mean? It's this is not that tastes
some
natural.
Kind of, it does. A lot of those things do taste like they threw some candies in there or something.
Yes.
Okay, so what are we doing here?
Yes, the Colossus company has got some 13,000-year-old DNA. Apparently
they had two. They had the 13,000-year-old and 70,000-year-old DNA. They got it from two different places.
Okay, and I guess they're cold weather guys. They got frozen somewhere, and I'm not sure that preserves the DNA better than anything
we'll
else.
talk about the cold weather thing. But okay.
So we have dire. So dire wolves are a
They're not actually wolves, it turns out.
It turns out they're not actually. They're white and they're about, they're big. They're 20 to 50 pounds bigger than a gray wolf. They're big.
It's also questionable whether they're white, because there's this.
We don't have $13,000 a year of old photos, do we?
Yeah, no, we don't. Unfortunately, the Game of Thrones things makes it want to sound like the direwolves are all up north, and they make them seem like cold weather creatures.
Yeah.
So you want them to look like a polar bear, with white fur. Actually, the direwolves in America were not up north. They were in across the South and spread across America, but not that far north. More like in California, in the La Brea tar pits and that sort of thing. Also down in South America. So the idea that they had white fur is probably not true.
Well, all right, you're messing up my
sorry.
my re-extinction here,
Yeah.
or de-extinction.
Yeah.
So, and what's this? Not wolves? What?
Yeah. So they thought that they were wolves, but it turns out they're in a different genus. They're not only a different species; they're a different genus. They're I can't pronounce this Latin here. Anaceondyrus or something, where wolves are Canis or something, right?
Yeah.
So they're not wolves. They're actually
they
more
had,
related.
They had a common lineage like 6 million years ago.
Exactly.
Right? So they couldn't. Go ahead.
Yeah, they're more related to the African wild dog than they are to a wolf.
Which is not in the wolf family, is what
Right.
you're saying. So
Yeah.
they're in the canine family. Wait a minute, wolves aren't canines?
Well, I don't know what apparently they're not a wolf, and they're not a dog. It's this other thing, but they're more closely related to the African dog than they are to the gray wolf.
Right.
Which is
so just like in Jurassic Park, they got some DNA from a dire wolf.
right.
They scraped out the DNA from a gray wolf and inserted 100% dire wolf in the egg, put it in a gray wolf, out pops a dire wolf.
Well, that's what you'd like to think. But that's not what they did.
No, it's not.
That's not what they did. Because if you wanted to revive some ancient thing, what you would think is you'd take the DNA from this extinct critter, and then you'd put that DNA into a host critter that is as closely related to that original one as possible, and then you'd get something, pretty much like what you're aiming for. But they didn't do that.
No.
Apparently there's millions of distinctions between the dire wolf and the gray wolf in terms of their DNA.
Yeah.
And what they did was they took 14 genes, and those are the ones that they altered. So basically what you did was you took a gray wolf and you tinkered around with 14 genes to make it look more like a dire wolf.
Yes. So it's a white, slightly larger gray wolf.
Yes.
And
And not really a dire wolf at all. So dire wolves, what is a dire wolf? Apparently they were one of the largest and most formidable predators of the Ice Age, roamed North and South America during the Pleistocene epoch, and died out about 10,000 years ago. That was when you had the great big die-off of all the megafauna, not just in America, but in other places around the world. And it probably had to do with climate change, but some people blame it on humans.
SUVs probably.
Well, no, they blame it on humans coming into the Americas and hunting all these large megafauna to extinction. But it probably had more to do with the Younger Dryas and climate changes. Yeah. Anyway,
and so you. And they couldn't mate with anything else. You couldn't. If you had a dire wolf, you couldn't take a dire wolf and a gray wolf. And
no, they wouldn't be able to mate because they're different. They're not only different species, they're different genus, so they wouldn't be able to mate. It had massive jaws and a very strong bite, and large teeth for crushing bones. I heard one quote that I liked. It's basically the linebacker cousin of the modern wolf.
Nice. I mean, everything was just so scary back
then. I know,
those
great big creatures.
I can't believe we made it.
There is an argument. There is an argument that humans weren't able to come across the land bridge from into the Americas until they domesticated dogs, because there were so many nasty creatures in the Americas that they wouldn't have survived without the dogs. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but that's a theory.
Right. So, people have been promising me a woolly mammoth for
I know.
A couple of years.
Yeah.
You guys get me all fired up thinking, look, we've got solid DNA.
Right.
You take an African elephant, but I think from what they're saying, all you would get is a hairy African elephant with bigger tusks or something like that, right? It's like not really getting the thing.
They're not actually doing what you think they're doing.
Yes.
Now with the woolly mammoths, I got to tell you this story. So the interesting thing about woolly mammoths is they are northern creatures. They were up in we have frozen woolly mammoths. Every once in a while, they'll find like the corpse of a woolly mammoth. Now, here's the story I was told in college, and so I studied geology in college. And one of my professors told me, and to this day, I don't know if it's true. I think it's probably not.
Okay.
But my professor told me that he was at this event where they were serving woolly mammoth burgers. That like there was a woolly mammoth that had died 10,000 years ago and had remained frozen for 10,000 years, and somebody took the meat from the woolly mammoth and was serving it as burgers. Now that is probably not true.
I've had burgers frozen for 3 weeks and
they don't taste so
great.
Yeah, so that's the story. Now I don't think it's true because, first of all, how do you know it was really frozen all that time? I mean, anyway, there's a lot of problems with that, but that was the story I was told.
I saw a comment that says, you could modify an ape to be tall, upright, and hairless. You wouldn't get a human being.
That's right.
That's probably pretty good.
Yeah. No, I heard another one.
I kind of like it. Go ahead.
Yeah. I heard another one was like, if you change the shape of the hood and the tires on a Ford Focus, it's not a Mustang.
Yes. But, I mean, well, what do you feel about the project itself?
So the larger question is, what do we think about this de-extinction thing?
Yeah.
And is this a good thing? Now, on the one hand, I want to say scientific research pays off in spades.
Yeah.
Just like generally speaking, you're trying to learn how things work.
Yeah, right. You do science for the sake of doing science.
Right. And you're trying to find new things, and you find new things, and all of a sudden you realize, well, look, we were trying to clone this thing, but we found a cure for leukemia. Or,
Yes.
So cool things can happen just from doing scientific research.
Right.
So from that perspective, I'm all for it.
Me too.
But, however, there are some bigger issues that you have to think about. Like,
hold on. Can I get to the science? Go back to the science before.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
It was a very compelling scientific explanation in Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
So Michael Crichton's explanation was what? So now we can get 13,000-year-old DNA because they've been frozen. But when was the last the extinction event?
For the dinosaurs?
Yeah.
60 million years ago.
So 60 million years. So you're not finding 60 million year old DNA.
Right.
But so how did they get around that in Jurassic Park? I thought it was pretty good though.
I don't remember.
Oh no?
No.
That they found mosquitoes in amber.
Oh my gosh!
That had sucked on the blood
of a dinosaur.
Wow! I mean that's really clever. I don't
clever.
think it's ever happened.
Yeah,
but,
that's very clever.
But it's very clever.
Yeah.
And so we could not get dinosaur DNA in the same way that you could find it frozen somewhere or in a tar pit that's 60 million years old.
Right.
But the 13,000-year-old we are able to find.
So apparently they took it out of a tooth and some other for the direwolf for this company here. And I as I read it, they had two different samples. One was 13,000 years old. One was 70,000 years old.
Ooh.
Direwolves have been around for a while, and went extinct relatively recently. But that mosquito thing is pretty clever.
It is
but
pretty
how
clever,
do you get? And this is a big problem. Is up until relatively recently, all of paleontology and anthropology and all that was based on stones and bones. Mm-hmm. You were looking at, here's a bone, and you were trying to reconstruct what can I figure out just from the bone. Now they're able to do genetic tracing on things, and it totally changes our perspective on a lot of this different kind of stuff. So the ability to get older and older DNA is really cool because it allows you to do different kinds of studies on relationships between creatures and what's going on.
All right, but what's happening that you get this old DNA, and you can now, with map out the genome,
right,
and see what does what, and then use that information to CRISPR,
yeah,
to modify the gene. I think that's what went on with the dire wolf. It wasn't that they were injecting 13 million year old, 13,000 years. They were modifying the gene to match. All right, we figured out where the hair gene is. Yeah. We figured out where, or just the long tusk gene.
Right. Yeah. So basically what they did was they took a gray wolf and they modified it in 14. I've heard 14, I've heard 20. Yeah. But they've modified it in certain places to make it more like the way they think a dire wolf would be, based on what they got from this other DNA.
But it's not in the same, like in the Jurassic Park way, where they said that we're going to hollow out a frog, frog DNA, insert dinosaur DNA, and then it will be.
Yeah, it's not that. It's not.
That's
that.
not that.
No. Basically, all they did was made cosmetic changes to a gray wolf. Right. And then called it a dire wolf. Okay. But now, still, it's still cool.
It's still great, but it's not. At least we can get our hands on Ice Age DNA. Can I give you? Can you tell me which of the? How about the giant ground sloth?
I know there's some. There's an American
3.7 meters. 3.7. What 3. How tall are we talking here? 12 feet.
Well, 4 times that. 3 times 4, 12. Yeah, about 12 feet, right?
A 12-foot ground sloth standing up, weighing 4 tons.
Right.
You could get one of those.
How'd you like to be driving along the parkway and all of a sudden one of those things starts walking across the road?
There's a relative of the Komodo dragon, the Megalania, which was a monitor-like lizard, like the Komodo, 7 meters.
Okay.
Do we need more of those?
Dragon territory here.
How about saber-toothed tigers? We get they're in the tar pit, right?
Yeah, I don't want saber-toothed tigers.
Do we need to reintroduce those to the wild?
No.
The Irish elk.
No, those are cool. Like some of these creatures are just these great big. Now, one of the questions is, why did the environment support these great big creatures back then? Where not now you
Every
don't have so
time
many.
you open Nature magazine, it's like, yes, a 6-foot mosquito. Or like, everything's gigantic.
Right. Or I saw one the other day, it was a millipede. It was like 7 feet long. Like why was everything so big back then?
Was it just that there's it was hotter? No, and more fauna or more things to eat?
Not 10,000 years ago.
No, it's colder.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's very weird.
I don't know.
It's very weird.
So we talked about the science for science sake.
Yeah. Then
there's the idea. This guy I was listening to, I'm like, what are you talking about? Like that we need to do this for the sake of the lack of biodiversity, because we have so many animals going extinct now. Whatever happened to the balance of nature when the dire wolves died out?
Yeah.
I think we've recovered from that in the last 13,000 years.
Yeah.
We don't. This is not going to restore some balance.
Yeah.
To have 150-pound wolves running through the forest.
So I guess there's a lot of things you have to consider here. One is, like, invasive species. Like right now, if we were to go down to the Potomac River, we might catch a snakehead fish, right?
There would be some kudzu.
Yeah,
on the bank.
So, and invasive species, generally speaking, are a bad idea because any particular ecosystem comes into balance. So there's these things eating those things, and this thing doing that thing. It's come to some level of balance, and those things change from time to time as new species come in and all that. But if you take some other species and drop it right in the middle of that, it's going to disrupt that
Asian
environment.
Carp in the middle of the Missouri River.
Yeah, or whatever it is. So even if we could resurrect the dire wolf, like, we don't know what that's going to do. All of a sudden, what are they going to do?
Yes, I love the idea. Right? Yes. Can we just have a zoo? Can we not? Please do not reintroduce.
Don't put them in Yellowstone.
I'm not even happy about putting gray wolf back into Yellowstone.
Right.
What was the idea? So now now farmers are having to deal with wolves because we reintroduced wolves. Mm-hmm. So if you need to handle the deer and bison population,
get some hunters or something.
Exactly. You put out, you sell some licenses. There's no problem here. We don't need.
Yeah. But
wolves.
the idea, wouldn't it be cool if we could resurrect the giant beaver or any of these other? Yes, it would be really cool if we could put them in a zoo.
Yes.
But the idea of unleashing them on the parkway,
right.
No,
so
I don't.
Whatever your argument is, I don't want to hear the biodiversity.
Right.
We need to reintroduce these things to the wild. But how about something like this? Due to encroachment, man encroachment,
right.
We have wiped out an important caterpillar in the Amazon.
and now we want to fix that.
And now we want to fix that, and we're going to re-engineer the caterpillar because he can only live at this level right here.
Yeah.
But we've already taken his environment out. So what if we re-engineer him to be able to live at this level and then introduce him back into the wild?
So there are situations, So
but do you even know how that's...
Right. Do we even know the consequences?
Have you war-gamed this thing out?
Yeah. So that there are things that we have killed, like the carrier pigeon or the what's that dog in Australia? The Tasmanian tiger. So there are things that humans have.
Dodos. Do we need dodos?
Humans have caused the extinction of certain creatures, and so kind of out of a sense of guilt, you could say, well, let's bring them back.
We could de-extinct them
to try to restore things back to the way they're supposed to be. But isn't there a little bit of arrogance in that? In thinking that, well, wait a minute, we know how things are supposed to be?
I mean, didn't you guys listen to Jeffrey Goldblum in Jurassic Park?
Nature finds a way.
Nature finds a way, and you just don't go messing about and think that you're going to know how this is going to work out.
There have been, in the course of the hundreds of millions of years that there's been life on the earth, all kinds of creatures have lived and died and moved on. And maybe, we don't know, maybe there's some sort of trajectory to this. Maybe there's a larger schema. Maybe there's a larger...
I mean, we didn't come from another planet. We are part of the natural system, believe it or not.
Yes, exactly. And maybe there's something going on at a mega scale in terms of things coming in and out of existence that, like, why are we messing with that? Like, if we were to go back, if we could, imagine we could go back in time, find all the creatures that were in the Americas 20,000 years ago, and then like bring them back and reintroduce them.
Because it's only fair.
Because it's, now, and maybe we would just like totally F things up by doing that. Because the world has moved on from that in some way, It's like, so the idea, the technology, brilliant, amazing, cool. Don't believe the media. They get it all wrong. They tell you that they're actual
science journalism.
It's terrible. It's absolutely terrible. I don't know biology. I know geology decent. I don't know biology all that much. And even I know this is a bunch of crap, what they're saying. So don't believe the science journalism. But there's an arrogance to it, and there's sort of a presumption that we're going to be able to fix these things.
Yeah, a hubris,
that we don't understand. Yeah, and I don't like that.
I don't. Yes. So if you can, instead of a modified African elephant that looks hairy, if you could actually make a woolly mammoth, I don't know, that'd be kind of cool. The Siberian tundra doesn't need them.
No.
If you want to make one and let him live in the zoo, that's fine.
Sure.
A giant ground sloth, I'd take one of those.
If we could take like Montana, and no disrespect to Montana, a lot of people live there, and people I know live there. But if we were to take Montana and say, okay, we're going to fence this area off, and we're going to put like experimental stuff that we're going to put some woolly mammoths, we're going to put some dire wolves.
You guys seen
that
the
would be
movie
so
yet?
cool. that would be so incredibly cool. But the idea that we're going to revive these things and bring, like, I don't want Megalodon out in the Chesapeake Bay. And, there are things, saber-toothed cats.
geez.
I don't want them around.
I don't even know if I would want one in a zoo.
I know.
It's terrifying.
Yeah. There was some kind of a dog-like thing. It wasn't a dire wolf. It was something else, and I can't remember what it was. There was something up in the northern reaches of Canada that was so awful that, like, it was amazing that when the humans came across the Bering Lands Bridge, that they actually survived this thing. And that's what I mentioned before about the idea that they had to have dogs, because this thing was just so horrible. And I'm glad that we don't have those things around anymore.
Oh, yes. What are you doing now? We were talking earlier about the dire wolf not being able to actually mate with a real wolf. And who knows? Maybe it's selective breeding led to its decline, or who knows what. But I think that this is all part of God's plan. We don't need animals mating with each other and producing other things.
Crazy creatures.
I watched this weird program, so it's like, scientifically it's along the lines of Ancient Aliens, you know what I mean? But it talked about, Soviet plans to, chimpanzees.
Right. As soldiers.
Yes, or just the idea of, like, trying to inseminate chimpanzees and then unwilling African women.
Right.
I mean, can you imagine a woman
horrible
squirting
things.
out some fortunately, it doesn't take, and so it doesn't. Yeah. But even things that are, I mean, how close are we from the chimpanzee? Like in the 99 percentile? Right?
Well, this is one of those things that I never have understood. It's like, people will say that we share 50% of our DNA with a banana.
Yes.
But then they'll say that modern humans only have 3% Neanderthal DNA. Those two things just don't make any sense to me. How can we share 50% of our DNA with a banana, but only 3% with a Neanderthal? That does not make any sense at all. So obviously they're measuring this in some other way, and I'd like somebody to explain that to me. If you understand that, please write the show, pigweedshow@gmail.com. I don't get that.
Well, wouldn't that mean that the amount of mating that was going on between Homo sapiens and Neanderthals, which, if you can do it, people are doing it.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, think how ugly those women were.
We don't really know, but
still,
yes,
I mean,
right. Maybe it was only going one way.
And a couple of beers in you on a Friday night, you maybe not so particular.
That's right.
But that there was so little of that that it was happening, and it could happen and produce offspring, but it happened in such few numbers that it's been diluted to the point to where there's only 3% left, and they would only be in Europeans. Is that right?
Yeah, so apparently there's very little Neanderthal DNA in people of African descent, much more in people of European descent. And then, of course, now they've only recently discovered the Denisovans or however you pronounce that, I don't know. So we have all these other questions about all that stuff going on. And, like, okay, should we bring back Denisovans or Neanderthals? Should we do that?
Yeah, or what is the little hobbit guy?
Yeah.
Right. So, do you remember we read in the Asimov? We read The Ugly Little Boy.
Right.
But this one wasn't a hybrid issue. It was a time travel thing, and they brought that poor little boy back, and he just didn't go well. And eventually, they sent him and his caretaker back. Accidentally left him there. But we have been fascinated. We have been, as far as we can imagine or have records of, hybrids, right?
Yeah.
Egyptian gods there's dog-headed gods
yeah.
and people. So we love the idea of the
Centaurs,
minotaurs. Yes,
right, yeah.
minotaurs. We love the ideas of mixing, and God's just like,
No, you're not going to do that.
do that. I mean, you can mess about there all you like, but I'm drawing the line somewhere, and I'll give you a mule and maybe a liger, but anything else, I don't care how closely related you are.
Remember the movie The Fly?
Yes. See?
Yeah, there you
God's
go.
like, see, that's what you guys would do if I left you on your own.
If it was just up to us, we would create so many horrible
it would
things.
Be so bad.
Awful. You'd have like a dolphin with a man's head,
Of course you would.
drowning.
Yes. Like, well, we just thought we'd give it a try. Like, why would you give that a try? Because we can.
Because we can.
So I think that's just one of the great stopgaps that's ever been introduced to humanity.
And unfortunately, we might be close to breaking that barrier.
No, guys. I mean, you can. Yes, keep going with it. In a way, I don't. I forgive the reporting on this a little bit.
Yeah.
Because you know what I mean. You need to gin up interest. These things take a lot of investment. You need some headlines. You need, and I do encourage this going forward, as long as nobody's doing any hybrid human stuff
right? Yeah.
out there. But in general, yeah, I'm kind of okay with the CRISPR gene modification or whatever. And maybe we don't need T-Rexes, but if we could just stick with the Ice Age, I think that would be.
Bring back a woolly mammoth. That might be kind of cool. Yeah. As long as you keep them in a certain area. Don't let them run loose.
Yes, some Siberian.
Yeah, don't bring back
preserve.
saber-toothed cats.
Just turn them loose.
I know, we don't need those things. Don't bring back megalodon. Don't bring, restrain yourself. But like, if it would be possible to actually bring back a dire wolf and then keep them in a certain area, that'd be pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I think. Yeah, but. Nature has a way.
Nature has a way both ways. Nature has a way both for things to survive, but also to let things go.
Yeah.
I mean, that's been the history of the planet. Things come and they go.
It'll reach a new stasis, and
that's right.
We'll be all right.
Yeah. So interesting work, guys, but it's not a dire wolf.
It's not a dire wolf.
Cheers. Thanks so much for listening to Beer and Conversation with Pigweed and Crowhill. Remember to visit us at pigweedandcrowhill.com or send us an email at pigweedshow@gmail.com.